You are making the world a better place by listening to the Joy of Living podcast. This is your guide to achieving a more purposeful, powerful, and positive life. Join Barry Shore in unlocking the best version of you and becoming happier, healthier, and wealthier. And now, here's your ambassador of joy, Barry Shore.
Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved immortal beings, and good-looking people here. But you're good-looking, you're always looking for and finding the good. That's a definition of a good-looking person. Always looking for and finding the good. You found good in abundance because you tuned in consciously and conscientiously to the Joy of Living podcast with your humble host, Barry Shore, known as the Ambassador of Joy. Notice I didn't say the Ambassador of Joy. The Ambassador of Joy, and you tuned in for one reason and one reason only. It's the best reason in the whole world, because you care the most, the entire world, about you. Y-O-U. And that's great, because when you become the best you make the world a better place. You build more bridges of harmony, create more joy, happiness, peace, and love in the world. And you will be rewarded, especially today, because you're going to meet one of the greatest storytellers. We call them historians. That is alive today. And it's an amazing book. And we'll talk about stuff that's just going to curl your toes, open your eyes and your ears and your heart. And it's going to be so much fun. So before we bring on Professor Barry Strauss, yeah, he has a great name, Barry. I just want to urge everybody to understand that you are joined right now by about 511,000 people around the world. By the time we bring on Professor Strauss, we'll be over 520,000. And you're always telling your friends and family to join, and I appreciate that. In the next few months, we'll be over probably 1 million people. And I urge you always to share this with 5 people, just 5. You want to share with 50 or 100, great, at least 5 people. Then we will touch more than 1 million people around the world, and maybe 2 million or so. So remember, you tuned in because you know that in this show we discuss the 3 fundamentals of life. And these are, number 1, life, your life has purpose. And we lead a purpose-driven life. Number 2 happens. That's case good. Number 2, you go mad. Now, MAD is a wonderful acronym. It stands for make a difference. You lead a purpose-driven life, you make a difference in the world. And the 3rd is to unlock the power and the secrets of everyday words and terms. And when you do these, you will be happier, healthier, and wealthier. Who doesn't want that? So imagine right now, this show is carried over the internet. If you ask anybody, what does WWW stand for? Invariably, they'll tell you to do with the internet. Factually speaking, they're correct. However, in our world, the world of the positive, purposeful, powerful, and pleasant, WWW stands for What a Wonderful World. And of course, that's a great song, right? And a big thank you to Louis Armstrong Satchmo for enabling that song to go viral. And not just touch tens of millions or hundreds of millions, billions of people on the planet. And whenever you hear the opening bars of What a Wonderful World, what do you do right away? You can't help it. You smile. Now, smile is one of the most important words you're going to internalize, utilize, and leverage in your life, because smile stands for seeing miracles in life every day. Seeing miracles in life every day. Let me tell you a quick story. It's about me. Imagine, if you can, I'm standing out in the morning, completely healthy and hearty, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. And in the evening, I'm in the hospital, totally, completely paralyzed. And it's not from an automobile accident, not a spinal injury. A rare disease took over my body and rendered me quadriplegic. Nothing in my body moved. I can only communicate by blinking my eyes. I was 144 days in the hospital. I was 2 years in a hospital bed in my own home. I couldn't move. 4 years in a wheelchair. I had braces on both my legs, my hips, to my ankles. That was progress. Thank God today I'm able to be vertical and ambulatory with help of a 7-foot walking wand. So I'm a triped, not a biped. Can't walk up a stair by myself. Can't walk up a curb by myself. I have help 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. You hear my voice. Positive, purposeful, powerful, and pleasant, all because of one word. One word, smile. Seeing miracles in life every day. Now, I'm privileged to speak not only to millions of people every month over the internet. I did an in-person appearance just recently. We have 1,127 people telling the story about Barry Shore. And I'm talking about miracles. And some people raise their hands and say, hey, Barry Shore, I've been up for hours. I haven't seen any miracles. I asked them, are you here? Can you hear? Can you stand still? I can't do that. Can you walk? I can barely do that. Do you have water, drink? Do you have food? Do you have a place to sleep? Do you have family? Do you have friends? Every single one of those is a miracle. And what's the proof? Simple proof. You didn't. A million people didn't get out of bed this morning. You know why? They died. By definition, if you're watching or you're listening, you didn't. And therefore, you have an obligation to live life to the full. Let me tell you a little quick funny story. My 8-year-old niece comes over to me a few weeks ago. She says, Uncle Barry, can we spell smile S-M-I-E-L? I thought about it. Smile, smile. It's all the same. Why not? I asked her how come. She says, because then it would stand for seeing miracles in everyday life. Out of the mouth of an 8-year-old. What was she doing? Creating the kind of world she wants to live in. CREATE is a wonderful acronym that stands for causing, rethinking, enabling all to excel. You're going to be rethinking a lot of things today because you're going to learn from one of the masters of the great art of history. And we'll bring on Professor Strauss in just a couple of minutes. I want to emphasize to everybody, we're talking about a small shift in perspective. Now, I've been working with people for more than half a century. And I got to tell you, 97.2% of the people who come to me, they drop the F in shift, and the other stuff happens. You want to keep your F in place. Shift your perspective just a little bit. You can internalize, utilize, and leverage the 6 most important words you'll ever learn. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. How you choose to respond to any given situation, choose your path in life in your trajectory. Before we bring on Professor Strauss, I want to emphasize and tell everybody, the new people, especially Professor Strauss, that I use a lot of 4-letter words. I even use the 4-letter FU word. And I do it because of the shock value when it's fun. Now, of course, the 4-letter words that we use, because we live in the world of the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant, are love, life, hope, play, free, gift, swim. And the 4-letter FU word is fun. Fun, that's right. F-U, capital N, capital N. Now, some people raise their hand and say, hey, Barry, sure, fun's only spelled with 3 letters. Not in our world. Or the positive, purposeful, powerful plan spelled F-U, capital N, capital N. So after the show, point your finger, twinkle in your eyes, smile on your face, tell your family and friends, F-U, everybody. You got their attention, add capital N, capital N. So what are you talking about? Let me tell you what I learned today from Professor Strauss. So before we bring him on, I want to urge everybody, use the 2 most powerful words in the English language 3 times a day from now to the rest of your life, and you'll be happier, healthier, and wealthier. What are these 2 words? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank stands for to harmonize and nurture kindness. KIND is a wonderful acronym. It stands for Keep Inspiring Noble Deeds. I can't think of anybody that I want to introduce you to that inspires noble deeds more than wonderful, amazing, fabulous Professor Barry Strauss. Wonderful Professor Strauss. Welcome.
Hi.
Say hello to
Hi, Barry. How are you?
20,817 people around the world.
Pleasure to be here.
I love that. He is so low key. Okay. May I call you Barry?
May indeed.
Okay. So first of all, we are honored and privileged to have you here. If I tell everybody your background, academic, and all the things that you've done, it would take the rest of the show. I'm just going to tell people 3 things. Number 1, teaching and learning at some of the finest institutions in the world. Number 2, published many books on what other people call ancient history and what I will call history, because the history of our past helps us understand the present and maybe even the future. And the third thing is happily married and a wonderful fellow, and he swims. So I love him a lot. Okay, so with that introduction, let's just jump right in, because we're discussing today your newest book, which I read and reread, and it's so interesting because to me, the way you present yourself and how you write it's almost like a mystery novel. It's a page turner. You want to keep reading more and more because it's fascinating. The title of the book is Jews versus Rome. So I'll give you the floor, Professor Barry Strauss. It's an intriguing title. Where did you get it? What does it mean and why?
Thanks. So I think on the one hand, the title refers to the fact that this is a book about 2 centuries in history, from 63 BCE to 136 CE. And in these centuries, there are a series of Jewish revolts against the Roman Empire that have really remarkable consequences, not just for the Jewish people, but for the world, because this is partly the crucible in which Christianity emerges. So tremendously important period and a period of conflict. But I think that the larger issue here in Jews versus Rome is really the question of a small people, any small people versus an empire or any empire. And really, which is the model that we want to follow in our world today? Or do we want to take elements of both? Are there things in both the Jewish side and the Roman side that will guide us living in the world of the 21st century? So that's why I called the book Jews versus Rome. The subtitle is 2 Centuries of Rebellion Against the World's Mightiest Empire. But I think the title, I hope it will make people think.
Very good. So we actually, in my world, in the world of business, oftentimes we use this phrase, we don't want people to think when we're doing business, and yet because it complicates the process oftentimes of making decisions. Here, what you just said is you want people to think, and it's really critical. I want to unpack 2 things that you mentioned. Use a great word, crucible. So people should look up the word crucible because it is really where things happen. That pot that is the crucible that gets heated up and makes that blend. So let's talk about, first of all, I don't think there's a person in the world, and we're a worldwide audience here, that has never heard of the Roman Empire.
Right.
By the same token, there's not a person on the planet that's never heard of the word Jews.
Right.
And yet, interestingly enough, the Roman Empire doesn't exist anymore. Jews still do. Would you like to address that interesting anomaly in life?
Well, it's a question of the sword versus the spirit. I mean, the Roman Empire certainly won when it came to the sword. The Jews won when it came to the spirit, when it came to the soul, and that allowed them to survive under often extremely difficult circumstances. And I think that's the reason why the Jews are still around. The Roman Empire is not. Now, to be sure, there are many things about the Roman Empire that are still around. And the Roman Empire is still with us today in spirit, if you will, if not in body. There are aspects of the West that are still reflect the Roman Empire and Roman values. But the empire itself crumbled. It did not survive.
So let's dovetail on what you just said.
Right.
And I'm going to make a bold statement, and you're the professor, so tell me where it has validity or not. The conflicts, and it's plural, that the Jews, a small province called Judea,
right,
at the tip of the Fertile Crescent,
yes,
which people know about today, of course, because of the uprising of Islamists, et cetera, versus this mighty empire, which really was almost the entire world of thought and such like that. Here you have the clash, and yet at many points, they actually became what you just called Western civilization. In other words, the amalgam of the two. Is that true?
It is true, yes. I mean, Greco-Roman values, Greco-Roman institutions are one pillar of Western civilization, but Jewish values through Christianity are another pillar of Western civilization. So, I mean, they both contribute to the world that we live in today.
And that world is being rocked by malign forces that want to tear down what we call Western civilization. And that was not that different than 2 millennia ago, right?
there's a similarity is that they're a conflict, but of course the issues were somewhat different 2 millennia ago.
Well, first of all, there were no Muslims in the world. I'm making a bold statement. Everybody knows it historically. There were no Muslims in the world. There were no Christians per se in the world. It was this tiny province, and just to make something else in terms of people listening in, and they are, and looking at the map of the world, and people should do that. The Roman Empire was also battling something called the Parthian Empire, as you point out so beautifully. And again, the book is a page turner. This is not just facts and data. It's a page turner because we're going to talk about women and all kinds of intrigue and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
So here you have the Parthian Empire, which occupies the space today called, for want of a better term, Persia, or Iran as it's known.
Yes.
And here you have these two major empires battling each other, much like this very moment.
Yes.
Here you have Rome in the body, we'll call it, of America,
Yes.
battling Parthian Empire, Iran, as an Islamic something.
Right.
And they're at loggerheads and potentially, literally going to war within a little bit of time, potentially.
Yes. Well, certainly I don't want it to seem as if this is a book about a conflict between the West and the Islamic world. It's not. And I don't think there needs to be a conflict between, let us say, the Christian West and the Islamic world. I think that these two worlds can and should get along. But yes, Clash of Empires is certainly a part of history. It was a big part of this period of history that I study, the clash between Rome and Parthia. And of course, it remains a part of history as well. Yeah, there is a potential conflict between the US and Iran, but there's an even bigger potential conflict between the US and China. So a clash of empires, absolutely, remains a part of history.
I am so glad to hear how you gave us the picture that there is no reason that the West and the Islamic world, or the Christian world and the Islamic world, cannot not only coexist, but actually work together for the benefit of humanity.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so let's go back to this pesky little province called Judea. And why is it that the Jews, and I'm sure there were other groups that revolted against Rome, and just because it's against power. However, it seems that the Jews never gave up. What is it about the Jews that kept them battling against something that, hello, can't you see? This is Rome. This is the empire.
Yes. It's a great question. So a couple of things. First of all, as you say, there were a number of people who've been conquered by Rome who rebelled. The Jews are not alone in that. What does make them distinctive is that they don't give up. They keep rebelling again and again and again. So why do they do that? So one simple reason, if you want a sort of pragmatic reason, it's because there are not only Jews in the diaspora in the Roman Empire, but there are Jews in the diaspora in the Parthian Empire. And the Jewish revolts are a subset, in a way, of the conflict between Rome and Parthia. If you are a Jewish rebel in Judea, you can look eastward to fellow Jews living in the Parthian Empire, and also to the possibility that the Parthian regime itself will help you against Rome, since the Parthians have no love against Rome and don't mind seeing revolts against the Roman Empire. So on the pragmatic level, that's a real factor. And not all the rebellions against Rome have this advantage of having people outside the empire to help them. The Germans, who successfully revolt against Rome, also have this advantage. I mean, the majority of the Germans are living not under Roman rule. They are free of Roman rule, and they can be part of the rebellions. So that's a pragmatic factor. But I think there's another equally important thing, and that is this historical and spiritual factors. So
let me ask you a favor.
sure.
Okay, we have sponsors that love the show. We wouldn't have them on if we didn't think they're worthy of your time. We're going to go to a quick break. We'll be
Sure.
right back on that cliffhanger right after
Okay.
this message. Don't go away.
Yep.
Hello, skincare connoisseurs. If you think you have tried everything in skincare, you are going to love what I am about to tell you. I'm pharmacist Benjamin I. Fuchs. I'm a dermatology pharmacist. And what I've discovered in my compounding pharmacy after decades of working with patients with skin traumas and skin diseases is the missing link in skincare is topical essential nutrition. And because of this missing link, we're not maximizing the potential of topical skincare. We're leaving skin beauty and skin health on the table. And that's why I formulated my Truth Treatments. Listen, the skin's an organ. It needs and wants and craves nutrients, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, and plant-derived minerals, and now it can get them in super high concentrations in my Truth Treatments. Originally formulated for dermatologists and their patients, now they're available to you. Check them out today at truthtreatments.com, and I know you are going to love the truth.
Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved immortal beings, and good-looking people. Maybe good-looking because you're always looking for and finding the good. We found good in abundance. Our cup runneth over with good. His name is Professor, that's his handle, Barry Strauss, and the name of the book is called Jews versus Rome. And we're deep in international intrigue that doesn't look much different than today. So we're just on the edge of our seats as Professor Strauss is telling us about, well, yeah, it's not that much different than other places in the empire with the Germans outside of Roman rule, some inside, and the Jews in the diaspora outside of Judea, and many in the Parthian Empire. So you're talking about intrigue and people and doing things. Okay, so more, please.
Okay. So there are other reasons for the repeated Jewish rebellions against the Romans. One is history. So the Jews had been an independent nation, and they had won their independence by rebelling against a different empire, by the Seleucid Syrian Greek Empire in the 2nd century BCE, in the famous Maccabean revolt, which led to the first independent Jewish state in centuries, after having been defeated by the Neo-Babylonians, the famous Babylonian captivity, etc., and so forth. So the Jews have this proud history of being fighters and having won their independence. It would be as if the Americans, having won our independence in the Revolution, a century later, oops, somebody conquered the United States, and Americans were told, you gotta live with that. Sorry, they would not have taken that lying down, and neither did the Jews take it lying down, although it took them a while to actually revolt. But on top of that, there is a spiritual dimension. So the Jews have a spiritual connection to their land and to the proposition, that the land is holy and that the land belongs to God. The land should be ruled by the house of God in Jerusalem, the temple. And furthermore, the Jews, unlike most peoples, had a holy book, which taught them this lesson week after week after week, the Torah, of course. And so they've got this history of fighting. They've got this holy book to hold them together. They also have the pragmatic possibility of help from across the border, not all that far away. On top of that, the Romans were not always the most diplomatic of rulers. They came and went. But in the period that leads up to the Great Revolt, the first of these revolts, the Roman governors are basically stealing the provincials blind, they're stealing the Jewish people blind, and they engage in a massacre of civilians in the Jewish holy city in Jerusalem. These are the things that lead to revolt, on top of which the Romans had suffered some defeats, both at the hands of the Parthians, just a few years earlier on the eastern frontier, and there had been a rebellion within the Roman Empire against the Emperor Nero. And, the word name Nero is almost a symbol of decadence on the part of the Roman Empire. So there There are all sorts of reasons that come together for this revolt, but also reasons for why there would be repeated revolts, why the revolts would continue. I mean, Jewish history had taught the Jews that when their temple was destroyed, as it had been by the Neo-Babylonians in the year 586 BCE, that within 70 years it would be rebuilt. That was the prophecy, and the prophecy turned out to be true. The temple was rebuilt. After the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in the first revolt, the Jews feel, well, it's time to rebuild the temple. But the Romans aren't going to allow that. And that leads to repeated revolts.
So we're talking about a unique group of people in the Roman Empire, based on what you just said, that has a history that predates Rome even. In other words, if you go back in time to, we'll call the Exodus from Egypt, which everybody in the world has heard about, plus minus 1300 BCE, a Davidic dynasty that runs for several hundred years, that had its own independence, even though they've had their own conquered and revolted and such like that. So they, and like you said, they had this unique process called a holy book, a divinity that gave them an independent mindset. And interesting enough, as you mentioned, the first temple, which was destroyed plus minus 586 of BCE, again, almost 600 years before the Common Era, when it was rebuilt, it was helpfully being rebuilt by a Persian emperor.
Yes, by Cyrus the Great. And so there's this long history of friendship and cooperation between the Persians, between the Iranians, and the Jews. And I think that's a large reason why many people in Judea looked eastward. They would rather have been ruled by the Parthians than be ruled by the Romans. They felt that they had a much happier history with the Parthians than they did with the Romans.
And again, I'm going to just throw out this only because I find it so much fun. Again, the book, Jews versus Rome, you got to get it, you got to read it. We're only tip of the wonderful mountain that sits here. We're in a year that we call 2026 in the calendar that we have currently. Mm-hmm. And the Jewish calendar is different, the Muslim calendar is different, the Greek Orthodox calendar is different. But suffice it to say, this could as easily be the year 70 CE. Because we're talking about clashes of empires, and Parthia is now called Iran, and Rome is now called America, and yet it's these energies, and who's in the middle? The elephants, when they dance, it's the little people that get crushed, right? You got the Jews there.
Right.
Jews are there throughout the millennia. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't know what year this is. This could just as easily be the time that you're talking about in the book, right?
Yes, it really is amazing how many similarities there are between then and now. And one of the similarities is that the Jewish people are not united. I've talked about all the reasons for Jews to rebel against Rome, but there were a considerable number of Jews who didn't rebel against Rome. In fact, there were some who supported the Romans and fought for the Romans against other Jews. And of course, if you were to look at Israel today, you would find a country in which there's a lot of divisions, a lot of disagreements, a lot of bitter political and religious disagreements. So in that sense, too, nothing has changed, and history is repeating itself.
It really does boggle the mind. Let's take a look at some sort of famous people. We'll start with one called Josephus, if you'd be so kind, and then talk about also this interesting being, Tiberius Julius Alexander.
Yes. So Josephus is a very important figure. He is the most important Jewish historian of the ancient world. He wrote the book, literally, on the Jewish revolt. We call it today the Jewish War. He also wrote, and that's a great book, but he wrote an even longer book which we generally call the Jewish Antiquities or the Antiquities of the Jews. It's a history of the world from the creation to the eve of the Great Revolt in the year 66 CE. Josephus was a Jew. He came from Jerusalem. His family were priests. On one side, he's descended from the Maccabean kings. And he starts out his life as a pro-Roman person. He's a go-between between the priesthood in Jerusalem and Rome itself. He travels to Rome. Then when the revolt begins, he's around 30, and he joins the revolt. He becomes one of the generals, perhaps the general in command of the rebels in Galilee. He very heroically leads the defense of a small city that the Romans have attacked. And after about 7 weeks, the city is conquered by Rome. He survives, and he changes sides. He goes over to the side of the Romans. He said that God came to him in a dream and told him that the Romans are going to win, and the wheel is turning, and he must try to stop the revolt and join the Romans, which he does. He fails to stop the revolt, and afterwards he spends the rest of his life living in Rome as a diaspora Jew, supported by the Roman emperors, and writing about the events that he had lived through and the events that came before his time. He's got a message and an axe to grind, and that is that the Jews are a great people, and they are not necessarily rebels against the empire. They're loyal Romans, and they're an ancient, venerable people. And that's the message he wants to give to other Romans. The message he wants to give to the Jews is, don't even think about rebelling against these guys again. The Romans are brutes. They will destroy you. So wise up, guys. And those are the two messages. He's quite courageous in a way to write the books that he does while he's living in Rome, in the belly of the beast, in the capital of the people who've destroyed his country. He writes in Greek, which is a learned language of the day, and also the language that most of the Jews in the diaspora in the Roman Empire spoke. They didn't speak Hebrew. They didn't speak Aramaic. Most of them outside of the land of Israel spoke Greek. That was their language. So that's
what we'll call the lingua franca, which means French, but the lingua franca was Greek. If you want to be considered an educated person, you spoke and wrote in Greek.
And yes, but even not so educated people, just ordinary people living in the eastern half of the Roman Empire would speak Greek. If you go to Rome and you go to the catacombs, the Jewish catacombs in Rome, the tombstones are mostly written in Greek, not in Latin, and certainly not in Hebrew. They're written in Greek. That was the language. The Torah had been translated into Greek centuries earlier. It's called the Septuagint, or the 70, supposedly 70 translators. And that was the Torah that Jews in the Roman Empire, that's the one that they knew mostly.
Two quick questions.
Yes.
And one of them is very deep. The other one is more of a data point statement, but it's a question. My research over the years says that somewhere between 5 and 10% of the Roman Empire around the period that you're writing was Jewish. Is that true?
I don't think we can. Short answer, no. We don't really know what the population of Jews in the Roman Empire was in this period. That was a guess, frankly. It's widely repeated. We don't really know. We do know that there were large Jewish communities especially in the eastern part of the Roman Empire. Cities like Alexandria was probably the largest Jewish city in the world, Alexandria, Egypt. There were a lot of Jews living in the cities of Syria and what is today Turkey. And there were also smaller Jewish communities in Greece, in Italy, in Rome itself. There was a large Jewish community. Cyprus had a very big Jewish population, and so did Libya. These are all areas with large Jewish populations. Are they 5 to 10% of the Roman Empire? Maybe not. We don't really know. It's really hard to say. We do know that Judaism and synagogues were quite popular with pagans around the Roman Empire. They admired synagogues, they admired Judaism. They would come and attend weekly gatherings on the Sabbath, festivals, but they did not themselves convert to Judaism. They were called, sometimes they were referred to in our texts as God-fearers. God-fearers. That is to say,
That's a nice title.
they respect and fear the God of Israel, but they themselves do not become Jews.
Fascinating. I mean, truly fascinating. So here's the deeper question.
Yeah.
There is a move, especially in the Islamic world, unfortunately, and sometimes also in the virulent left-wing world of socialists and communists, to erase the Jewish presence in the world and deny the fact that there were Jews and Jerusalem and a temple predating Islam and Christianity. And you're telling us, well, no, hello, this is an ancient, venerable people.
Yes, I mean, and of course there are good people in the Islamic world and all over the world who wouldn't buy into that. But yes, unfortunately, there's some people who try to erase the history. But the earliest reference to Jews we get in a secular text, aside from the Bible, is an Egyptian inscription that's dated to around 1210 BCE that refers to the defeat of Israel. And if you don't like that, and there is a minority of scholars who are skeptical about whether the word really means Israel, there are various other inscriptions, again, not Jewish ones, but from other nations in the region that refer to Israel or to the house of David from the 9th or 8th centuries BCE. So there's lots of ancient data, secular data, non-biblical data, to demonstrate the antiquity of the Jewish people, not to mention the archaeology in Israel and elsewhere in the ancient world of synagogues, of ritual baths, mikvot, and inscriptions all over the place that demonstrate its antiquity. There's a great synagogue in Sardis in Turkey, so in Western Turkey. There's a very large synagogue from the ancient period. And there are a synagogue on the island of Delos in Greece, various places in the Mediterranean world and in the ancient world. And of course, in Israel itself, numerous ancient synagogues have been excavated.
So you mentioned about people being attracted to, let's say, how Jews worship these Oriental people, because again, Rome is in Italy, we'll call it European, for want of a better term, even though it was not Europe.
Yeah.
Here you have this ancient, venerable people who are Oriental, because we are an Oriental people. We're at the beginning of Asia. And it attracted famous women. I mean, women who became either converts or became Jewish princesses. Can you mention one or two? Because again, this is a page turner.
The Emperor Nero's wife, Poppaea Sabina, was attracted to Judaism. She certainly did not become Jewish, but let's say she dabbled in it. There's a woman called Helena, Queen Helena. She is queen of a kingdom that we refer to as Adiabene. Basically, it is what is nowadays Iraqi Kurdistan. So the Kurdish region in the northern part of Iraq. And she and her sons in the 1st century CE convert to Judaism. They actually become Jews. This is a very radical thing to do, and it's not a popular thing to do. It's a pagan country, and it's not really the done thing to have a different religion than your people. But she's the Dowager Queen, and after she succeeds in having her favorite son named as her successor, she moves to Jerusalem. And spends the better part of a decade in Jerusalem. She builds a palace there. In fact, her family builds several palaces there. And she studies Judaism, and she's also a philanthropist who feeds the people during a famine. She has food imported into Judea to feed the people there during a famine. She then goes back to her homeland, and she arranges that when she dies, she will be buried. Her bones will be brought back to Jerusalem and buried in a tomb, which still, the ruins of which you can still see. It's in East Jerusalem. It's generally called nowadays the Tomb of the Kings. But most scholars believe that this was the tomb of the dynasty of Adiabene. Helena and two of her sons, who succeeded her on the throne, and her husband on the throne, were all buried there. Remarkable place. And her grandsons and other members of the family joined the rebellion. They went to Jerusalem. They were educated in Jerusalem. They joined the rebellion. They fought for the rebels to the bitter end. They were captured by the Romans at the end of the rebellion. So it's a remarkable story, and one that's really not very well known.
Well, the good news is Professor Barry Strauss is making it known. And I can tell you, I read the book. I read it actually twice. It is so fascinating. Now, again, we have sponsors that love the show. Be right back. Don't go away. There's more Barry Strauss after this brief message. Opportunity. What an opportunity. I'm going to use 2 4-letter words right now. Free gift. Free gift. Yes. You can have a copy of my best-selling book, The Joy of Living, How to Slay Stress and Be Happy, the ebook version for absolutely free. All you have to do is send an email to me, Barry, Barry, at barryshore.com, and in the heading, the subject line, just write, free gift. It's as easy as that. This is a life-changing, life-enhancing opportunity. Barry at barryshore.com. You'll be glad you did. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Free gift. Do it now. Take the action. Make it happen right now. Best wishes. Bye. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved immortal beings, and good-looking people. You're good-looking. So always looking for and finding the good. We found good in abundance. You are learning so much, and I hope it's things that you didn't know, and you're fascinated by. Get the book, Jews versus Rome. Let's talk about the rebellion, the famous one, the one that people sometimes have heard of, Bar Kokhba. What is that all about, and why?
So this is actually the third major Jewish rebellion against Rome. There were some minor ones as well.
Like you said, they never give up, these people.
No, they're crazy. And so this is after it becomes clear that the Romans are not going to allow the Jews to rebuild the temple. They're in fact not going to allow the Jews to rebuild Jerusalem. The Romans have been very harsh against the Jews and Jewish rebels now for decades. And so there is a rebellion planned. And so the Romans decide that they're going to rebuild. They destroyed Jerusalem at the end of the first revolt, and they left it in ruins, and they destroyed the temple.
Approximately what year was that?
So the first revolt in the year 70, they destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. So now we are a number of decades later. We're in the year 132. And when the Bar Kokhba revolt begins, Bar Kokhba is what we call a nom de guerre. It's a war name. It's not the guy's real name. His real name is probably Bar Kosiba or Ben Kosiba, and it means either the son of someone named Kosiba or someone who comes from a small town named Kosiba. We're not sure. Bar Kokhba means the son of a star. Why the son of a star? Because the prophet Isaiah is widely interpreted to mean that the Messiah will be called the son of a star. And it's clear that Bar Kokhba's followers consider him to be the Messiah. Now, I must point out that unlike for Christians, where the Messiah is, it's complicated, but for Jews, the Messiah does not have to be a divine figure. He will be a secular figure, but he will restore the monarchy of King David, restore the independence of the Jewish people, and he will usher in an age that will lead to the redemption. And some of the followers of Bar Kokhba felt this guy was the Messiah. He was going to restore the monarchy of King David and usher in the redemption. But first he was going to defeat the Romans. So why do they want to defeat the Romans? Because the Romans decide a few years earlier that they are going to rebuild Jerusalem, except not as a Jewish city. They're going to rebuild it as a pagan Roman city. And this is after all the massacres the Romans had carried out in Judea, in Egypt, in Cyprus, in Libya, in Mesopotamia, that is ancient Iraq. These rebels have had it up to here and they're not going to take it anymore. So they take several years to plan what basically we'd call irregular warfare or a guerrilla uprising. They they make weapons. They arrange for strongholds. They dig tunnels to fight the Romans. And in the year 132, it erupts and it takes the Romans by storm. They're shocked. They're not able to cope with it. Possibly the governor is killed. We're not sure. The Romans have to bring in reinforcements from neighboring provinces. It's not enough. And the emperor, when he goes to speak to the Senate, the usual thing he says is, "I and the army are well. We hope you're well as also." But he can't say that. He refuses to say that because the army is doing so poorly. That's how much of a challenge these rebels are to the Roman rule of Judea. Now, eventually, the Romans bring in reinforcements all the way from Britain. The only people they have, so this is thousands of miles away, about 3,000 miles away. These are the only people they have who can handle something like this, because Britain is also a very rebellious province. In fact, the Romans never succeed in subduing Scotland, which they try to do several times. So the governor of Britain and his staff are brought in to impose the methods that they had learned in the West, really savage reprisals, counterinsurgency with a vengeance, destroying villages, going into caves, killing people, burning, looting, and eventually they are successful and they put down this rebellion. There is a last stand of the rebels at a place called Beitar, which is a village about I forget if it's 9 miles or 9 kilometers away from Jerusalem. And they destroy the rebellion, kill Bar Kokhba. Some of the rebels seek refuge in caves in the Judean desert, and the Romans smoke them out, literally. I mean, in some cases, they literally suffocate them with smoke. It's a horrible ending for them. From the point of view of the archaeologists and the historians, it's kind of useful because a lot of their possessions in these caves have survived in the bone dry climate of the desert. So we have what we call archives. We have collections of letters that these people wrote, including 2 women, one named Babitha. And the documents that survive are fascinating. They just open a window into life in what is now the border region between Israel and Jordan in the 2nd century CE. So from that tragedy, we did get some useful information that tells us about what life then was like and what life was like for a woman in that period. It's quite fascinating.
So the upshot, I want to unpack a couple of things that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So Bar Kokhba, as he is named,
yes.
Let's be very amazed here. He's using a reference to a prophet named Isaiah.
Yes.
Now, in today's world, amongst educated people, they've heard of Isaiah.
Yes.
Isaiah predates Bar Kokhba by some 700 plus years.
Something like that, yes.
So a continuous understanding of the people, that there's a history that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years that people are completely familiar with, that he can say, well, I am the result of Isaiah. I mean, that's amazing. It's like right now in America, we're in the year 2026, going back 700 years, 1300. It's hard to make a reference to something 1300 years ago that most Americans would ever heard of. Here you have the continuous line of information. That in itself quite profound.
It is.
And as you mentioned, the Romans are noted for being brutes, and they did use brute force. And yet here you have these feisty people, women, and we don't give up. Because even when the revolt was put down and people are exiled, well, guess what? There are still Jewish communities around the world.
Right. Yes. And, to be clear, many of them did give up. Many of them said enough already. And there were Jews who became pagans. There were Jews who became Christians. Later on, there were Jews who become Muslims. So it's not always the case that they all continue. But some do.
And to this very day. I mean,
to this very day, yes.
The fact that there are Jews in the world today, even though it's a small number, it's a very funny thing, Professor Strauss. I just heard recently on a Joe Rogan podcast that a friend sent to me, a little clip, and Joe Rogan was asked, how many Jews do you think there are in the world? So Joe Rogan answered initially, I'd say plus minus 1 billion. Because there are 1.5 billion, 2 billion Christians and 1.5 billion Muslims. Okay, figured 1 billion Jews because they're very influential. And then the fellow said, you sure? But they said, no, okay, I'll go with 500 million. Okay, 500 million. Professor Strauss, how many Jews in the world today? Complete, total, forget Orthodox, non-Orthodox, anything.
I think the number is 15 million.
It's not a rounding error in the population of the world, which is 8+ billion, right? And yet the influence that this historic community, as fractured as it appears, still has in its land, with a connection to the holy book and the temples and the wars that you write. It's amazing that there were people to still fight against Rome. I mean, where do you get the people? It's fascinating. Again, the book is called Jews versus Rome. We only touched on tiny pieces. It is so well written, as Professor Strauss' books are, and it's fascinating. You love it, and I urge everybody to get a hold of it. There's many more things we can discuss. As I'm sorry to say, we're coming to a close in our time together. I have 3 quick questions for you. Are you ready?
Sure.
Number 1. Will you come back again?
Sure, I'd be very happy to. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 2, Professor Barry Strauss. You have only 80 seconds to answer this question. What is your most fervent desire?
My most fervent desire is that we should all live in peace and prosperity and get along with each other and respect each other without wars. That's my most fervent desire.
A very Jewish concept. Thank you. And number 3, may I give you a hug in front of now 528,911 people around the world? Ready?
Sure.
Let me tell you what HUG stands for. Heartfelt, unlimited giving. 1, 2, 3. And you're listening to, of course, The Joy of Living with your humble host, Barry Shore, and our amazing guest, Professor Barry Strauss. And you tuned in because you care the most in the entire world about you. And you tuned in because you know in this show we talk about the 3 fundamentals of life. Number 1, life. Your life has purpose. Number 2, you lead a purpose-driven life. You go mad, make a difference. Number 3, unlock the power and the secrets of everyday terms. You do this, you'll be happier, healthier, and wealthier. WWW, what a wonderful world. Smile, seeing miracles in life every day. Or as my 8-year-old niece says, seeing miracles everyday life. Create the kind of world you want to live in, causing rethinking. You learned a lot today, causing rethinking, enabling all to excel. And use the 2 most powerful words in English language 3 times a day from now the rest of your life. You'll be happier, healthier, and wealthier. And after of the show, when you see your family and friends, I want you to point your finger, have a twinkle in your eye, or smile, and tell everybody, F you. Better add right away, Kathleen. You got their attention and say, now you got your attention. Share with what you learned today. It's so fascinating. The two most powerful words are thank you, thank you, thank you. So we're a blessing from Professor Strauss and Barry here. Go forth. Live exuberantly. Spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad. Go make a difference. Professor Strauss, don't go away.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joy of Living podcast. Now that's another step towards your healthier, happier, and wealthier life. Never hesitate to do good in the world, no matter what the situation. Join us for another upbeat discussion next time at barryshore.com. And be sure to leave a rating and subscribe to the show to get more conversations like this. And remember to share it with your family and friends too. See you on the next episode.